Do you know how much you made that entire year?
Yes, I think I made just between start to finish well over a million. Well over. Only because I did my taxes, so I had to
A
because
million dollars. Hold on. $1 million?
yes, yes.
Okay, so tell me what a PRN nurse is. What does it stand for and what it is?
So PRN literally stands for pro Renata, so it's as needed.
Were they paying you 10 to 13K the whole time?
They sure were.
What is up, guys? Jason here. Welcome back to the channel and our series, Nurses to Riches, The Road to Fire. Today's guest has a story that is going to leave you speechless. Not only are you going to learn what a PRN nurse is, but you'll find out how she's been pulling in over $1,000 per shift in that role. And just wait until you hear this. During the pandemic, she racked up nearly $1 million as a travel nurse, landing contracts that paid up to $13,000 a week. That's right, a week. And we're diving deep into how she managed this, how many hours she worked, what insane incentives her agency offered, and how she used her PRN jobs to keep the cash flowing between contracts, all while running her own business. So, tell us what your name is and a little bit about yourself.
My name is Lovely, and I'm currently a PRN travel ICU nurse. I currently live in South Florida and I work in Southern California.
Hmm. Okay, so tell me what a PRN nurse is. What does it stand for and what it is?
So PRN literally stands for pro Renata, so it's as needed. So typically we don't work on like a say compare it to a contract. So I don't have a contract. So I don't have a set schedule, set days. I'm literally just credentialed with a couple of agencies and I work whenever I want to work. I just pick up shifts at my leisure and whenever there's an open shift if a hospital has a higher census, less staff, then I just come and I plug in the different spots that they need.
Oh man, this is going to be an interesting episode. Okay, first though, I want to talk about your background. Let's talk
Yeah.
about where you grew up,
Okay.
your family. Do you have
Mhm.
any siblings? Those kinds of things. So tell me where you grew up first.
So I grew up in South Florida, love it. I still live there. I don't know if I'll ever leave because that's just where my roots are. So I come from a Haitian American family. Both my parents were born in Haiti and migrated over here to America to live the American dream, which in my opinion, I believe that they are. So I am the youngest of three siblings. I have two older brothers, so I am the princess of the family through and through. And we basically grew. My family still lives in Florida, in South Florida, and I'm just kind of here in California on my own. But yeah, I love it. We are pretty much a close family. Just the five of us, we kind of just take care of each other, and my brothers
Nice.
and I, we communicate all the time and stuff.
Wait, how old did you say they are?
Ooh, they are reaching their 40s. We usually don't talk about stuff like that. I feel like I'm old. I don't like sharing my age.
And none of them work in healthcare?
None of them. Actually, that's the kind of segues into the reason why I became a nurse was because my mother, she went to school to be an LPN. She
Oh,
passed the NCLEX. She actually applied and got accepted to a job on the very first day she was supposed to work. The post office called her. So she was like, maybe. So then she decided to do the post office and never went back. So I just kind of picked the baton up and just ran with it.
wow. It's like, Monica's mother, Monica, my wife,
Mhm.
her mother went to school in the Philippines. You know, all Filipinos, they become nurses, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so her mom was supposed to become a nurse. So she was a year from finishing nursing school, and then she had Monica's brother, right? And then my mom wanted to be a nurse. So while she was going to school, she finished her high school career, and then she was going to enroll in nursing school. But her mother was a stay-at-home mom, while my grandfather was like the working man. You know, like old
Mhm.
traditional
Yes,
families.
yes, trust me.
So my grandmother did not want her to go to school. She did not want her to go to the university, and my mother was forced to stay home and take care of her siblings and things like that.
Mhm.
So she wasn't even able to go to school. So, but both of our mothers wanted to be nurses. So I guess I kind of fulfilled my mom's dream of
Yeah.
me myself becoming a nurse because I'm the only one in our family who is a nurse.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Does
Yeah.
is
So,
anyone else
but
in your family interested in the medical field, or is it just you just want
no, not at
Mhm.
all. Like none of them. Like I actually became the power of attorney for my mother's healthcare because
Smart.
they don't know anything about healthcare. So I feel like at least that was the good thing about
Mhm.
getting into nursing. You know, you as a nurse, if your
Mhm.
parents get sick, at
Mhm.
least you are like a strong advocate for them in the
Right.
in the medical field.
Mhm.
Okay, so your mom, she ended up going a different route,
Yeah.
and then so what made you go into nursing then? Was it because your mom didn't get to fulfill those things?
I think so because
Yeah.
she's always like doctor, lawyer, nurse, doctor, lawyer, nurse. Like that's like her thing in like the Caribbean family. Like they like their kids to be in like in the medical field or a lawyer or a police officer. They like stuff like that. So my mom was like, "You really should try it." When I graduated high school and I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. To be honest with you, my mom was like, "Just try it." So I ended up going to like some private school for like medical assisting, and I think I went through like a 7-8 month program where I graduated with a certificate, and then I ended up becoming like a medical assistant phlebotomist. And I was doing that for a couple years and I just wasn't satisfied. So my mom was like, just do it. Just try it, see how you like it. So I ended up going to like a state college for like a 4-year bachelor's degree. And I loved it.
Wow. So you got your BSN then?
I got my BSN, correct.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, I interviewed a nurse a few episodes ago. The video's not out yet, but
Mhm.
she got her associate degree in nursing,
Mhm.
and she went on to go into leadership, and ultimately she worked in like a home care agency, then hospice agency, and she opened up her own hospice agency and invested like $6,000 into it. Didn't know a thing about how to get started,
Uh-huh.
and she was able to generate like $3 million from this business. Yeah. And so people ask me, "Hey, do you think I'd be able to succeed as a nurse with an associate's degree?" And
Yeah.
that's just living proof right there. You don't need a bachelor's degree. Even though me and Monica, we do have a bachelor's degree,
Mhm.
I still work with nurses who have their associate's degrees and they are extremely successful. Like
Right.
some of them have started their own businesses as well. Like you said, you work in California, so you've probably seen this here or there. I don't know what part of California you work in, so we'll talk about that later. But I
Mhm.
work in Northern California and I work at Kaiser, and specifically the hospital that I work in, nurses are always talking about how they're investing their money. So I often come across nurses from all walks of life who are investing their money and making a lot of money doing it, right? But now let's talk about, you said that you went to school for phlebotomy.
Mhm.
You did that for a few months, and
Mhm.
then you went to a state school and you got your bachelor's. Did
Yes.
you take out loans?
No, actually, that's actually the part that I usually tell my nurses is that don't be ashamed to go because originally it was a community college. So that's where I got my associates. It was broken up into two. When I finished, I think they got their accreditation somewhere somehow. So then I ended up matriculating into, and I automatically got accepted into the bachelor's. So it was a 2+2. But when it was a community college, the tuition was so cheap that every semester I would get a check back. So I got what was the Pell Grant, and it would cover my tuition and then would just send me the rest every semester. So it was like I was getting a check back. So I was like, I'm not going anywhere else. I'm going to stay here. And the same thing with my bachelor's. Like the tuition wasn't that much of a difference. And plus, it was all online. So like I literally every semester got a check back.
Wow. And this was in Florida as well?
Florida, yes, South Florida.
That is awesome because like people think, oh, if it's a red state, you're
Mhm.
probably not going to get a lot of assistance. But there was another nurse that I interviewed who got her LPN,
Mhm.
then went to RN,
Mhm.
then from RN she went to BSN, then BSN to MSN, and she did all of that for like $3,000,
You're
somewhere around there.
kidding me.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, she did it in, I think she said like 2.5 to 3 years, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I mean, it was like super accelerated.
Oh
She
yeah,
went fast.
that's
Um,
tough.
but yeah, and she did this in Georgia, mind you, right? So like the state, it doesn't matter what state you're in. If you do your research and you are very adamant about making sure that you don't spend all of the money or borrow all of that money to pay for school, then you can do it very cheaply, right?
Right.
So you ended up going to a state school, and
Yes,
that's why you don't have a lot of loans like everybody else does.
correct.
But state school, to get into state school is really hard.
It's competitive. There's a lot of waitlisting. Who's a lot of waitlisting?
Yeah.
But I think because I had already had my associates, it was just like an automatic, okay, you're in for the bachelor's.
Right.
It took me a little bit. I had to make sure that when I was doing the prerequisites for the associates, like you have to make sure that your grades are on point. There's like a point system to where the higher the GPA, the better the chance you get of kind of getting in with your associates. So it's very competitive. Yes.
So what were your grades like?
Ooh! I am good at everything else except math. I don't know what it is with me and math. I've never been good at math. Math was my only class where I had like a C, but everything else is just like, it's fluff work, you know.
Yeah, it's funny because our daughter, she wanted to go into computer science, and I was like, why do you want to do computer science? You've never shown any interest in computer science ever. And I remember there was one point, like I think it was like 3, 4 years ago, she was watching Grey's Anatomy. She watched like every single episode, every single
Oh,
season in one summer. And during that summer, she was like drawing like illustrations of the
mhm.
heart and the chambers of the heart and all these things. And I'm like, and she
Yeah.
was thinking of going into medicine,
Uh,
but that only lasted like a summer, right? But then, school, she ended up finishing graduating high school, and she said, I'm going to go into computer science because I can make a lot of money.
wow.
And this is what I said. I said, I've never seen you shown any interest in that. And it's been one semester. Like she lasted one semester before she said, I don't think I like doing this anymore. So she asked what other options she has, and I said you should just go into nursing because if you think about it, like nursing is one of the fields, professions and careers that you can get into where you're not going to be replaced by AI right away. You're not going to be replaced by technology. Like
Right.
we do a lot of manual labor, critical thinking, our profession requires a lot of empathy and things like that and communication with patients. And that's so it's one profession that it's going to be safe for the relative like foreseeable future. So that's what she's doing now. She's gonna start taking her prerequisites, and she's gonna go into nursing. Yeah,
Good for her. I'm
but
sure
I,
she knows.
yeah, but I'm telling her, I'm like, listen, you need to go straight for CRNA,
Yes.
or I've interviewed nurses in the past who do like psych and P, and they're
I love
making really good money, right?
absolutely.
So we're gonna try to like at least help her and move in any one of those directions,
Yeah.
right?
She's got a good
Um,
support system, so whatever she does, she'll fly.
Yeah, yeah. But she's in a community college right now. She wanted to go to a UC school. And I said, just stay in a community college. It's going to be a lot less expensive, get really good grades. And then you don't have to worry about getting all these loans.
Mhm.
So
I agree.
hopefully she continues on in that route.
Mhm.
So far, she's doing really well. She's got like straight A's. So she just needs to keep that up because you know how competitive it is, right?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. So you ended up getting your degree there. And you said you had no loans, which is
Nope.
amazing, right?
Mhm.
Okay. What did you do after you graduated?
Um, oh boy, that's where things got a little rocky. It took me a little bit to pass the NCLEX. So when I finally did, I ended up just accepting the very first job I could find. Like the first person who sent me a yes, I just took it. So I ended up getting a job at the local hospital in my city, and I was working night shifts, which was like totally, I don't think nurses realize how taxing night shift is on your body. But I accepted a job on a med surge floor, no telly. And I did that for about a year. And then as soon as like a position opened up for the residency program for ICU, I immediately took it because I knew that I wanted to be in a trauma environment and at some point in my career. So after about a year or so on the med surge floor, I just transitioned over seamlessly.
Wow. How would you describe your experience working as a med surg nurse? Because Monica works as a tele nurse, and
Mhm,
every time she's floated to med surg, she
mhm.
hates it.
I hated it. I hate it. I hate no shade to med surg nurses. I love y'all. Y'all are the backbones of the hospital, but I can't do it. If
Mm,
you couldn't pay me $1,000,000 to go back to the floor, I just can't do it. I think it's just I don't know, it's like the patients are just because I'm so used to seeing critical patients. So it's like when I see a patient that's on the med surge floor that's like walkie-talkie, it's just me, I just get so bored. I love to be on my toes. I love seeing patients that are on drips that are crashing. That's my speed. But it's just, seeing a med surge patient pressing the call bell for a turkey sandwich, just like, oh, really?
I forgot to ask you, when did you graduate? What year was it?
This was 2016. I started my med surge job April of 2017.
Oh, okay. So you've been a nurse now. You've been working as a nurse for 7 years now.
Yes. Mhm.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
Okay, so and then a year after you started working, you became an ICU nurse
correct. In 2018.
in 2018. Okay, and do you remember how much they were paying you at the time?
Before I left, and this is with night shift and ICU differential, I was making anywhere between 30 to 31 an hour.
Wow, that's awful.
It's not
But this is Florida, right? This is Florida.
I
Because I know you look back now and like, man, I made that. I only made $30 an hour.
made
Like,
that work. Like, how do I make it
yeah.
work? I don't know. But I did throw in a little bit of home health and hospice nursing. So that's when I kind of sort of stuck my foot in the PRN field was back in like 2019 because Couldn't do it. I was like literally living, not even paycheck to paycheck, like paycheck to week before the next paycheck. I was
Wow.
like, I
Wow.
was broke that weekend that I got paid. That's how bad it was.
Wow. Were you still living with your parents at the time?
I was not. No, I was on my own. Mhm.
That's why it was so hard. And a lot of people say, yeah, but the cost of living in Florida is less. So it's okay to get paid a little bit less down there.
It's
Do
not.
you agree with that?
No, not at all. People ask me a lot of the times, like, you live in South Florida and you live in Southern California. Like, how does that work? Like, the cost of living is just insane. But I'm actually living within my means, I would say. Well, now I am. I'm able to afford it. But just looking in hindsight, like, I've no clue how I did it.
Mm. Yeah. Do you remember how much you were paying for rent at the time?
I was paying like 2,000, 2,100, and this was for a two-bedroom, two-bathroom at the time.
Yeah, that's pretty high. Damn.
And
Because
it
we
was
lived in New
like
York.
a suburbs. It was like
Yeah,
a
I was
regular
thinking
neighborhood.
it's less than that. We lived in New York and we were spending 2,500, which is a lot. It's still a lot. $2,500 a month for a two-bedroom, two-bath. But this is in New York and you're in South Florida paying $2,100. So it's not that much of a difference, you know?
Yeah.
And in New York, they get paid more. I mean,
Right,
still not as much as what we get paid in Northern California,
right.
but it's a lot more than Florida,
Yes, yes.
right? Okay, so why did you end up leaving that position as an ICU nurse?
Something had happened. Long story short, I took care of my hospital's very first COVID patient. And at the time, we didn't really know much about COVID. And so there were no real true protocols in place. We were kind of just winging it, to be honest with you. Hopefully, I don't get myself in trouble. But yeah, we were winging it. And so I can remember like it was last night, the patient that I took care of. I was working at a level 2 hospital. And the patient that I had that had COVID needed an ECMO cannulation, and my hospital was 100% not prepared for that. So we had to fly in a team from Miami to cannulate him inside the ICU room. They literally sterilized the entire room, draped him up, and cannulated him right there. And when the team came in, they were in like the bunny suits, like head to toe bunny suits, like the hazmat suits. And they're looking around at us like, why don't you have any hazmat suits? Where's the PPE? I was standing there with just a surgical mask on, no N95, no nothing, no nothing on me. And so they recommended to, I guess they pulled some strings and got to the CEO of the hospital and reported me and said that I wasn't in proper PPE and that the hospital was like basically exposing me to COVID and I could send that over to my coworkers, my family. So then they immediately like suspended me. It was like so many different things. So in the middle of my suspension, I was laying down in the bed watching TV and I was flickering through Facebook and I saw an ad that said to go to New York for like, I think it was like 10K a week at the time. And I was like, yep, doing it. And I didn't even put it 2 weeks in. I was gone the next day. Never went back.
Oh gosh, you're not the first nurse I've heard of and I've interviewed who said that either they were being bullied at work and
Mhm.
the employer didn't care about what was happening to them. One of them got in a major accident and actually she got injured at work. Somebody attacked her at work. It was a patient. And her name is Lois. I don't know if you know her, Nurse Lois.
Mhm.
Yeah, she got attacked by a patient and she got admitted into the same hospital she was in. But within like 2 weeks or so, not even, they were asking her when she was going to come back to work.
You're kidding.
And it's just every now and then you have these.
You're
A lot
kidding.
of nurses leave their jobs because of their bosses, their employers.
Mhm.
Thankfully, I work for a department that has one of the most amazing directors that I've ever had.
Mhm.
So many of the nurses now we're at a point where we haven't had much vacancies in our department. Like we have a 3% vacancy rate right now because nurses are not leaving our department. They keep filling the positions, but nobody leaves, which is great. Like that says a lot about management, right? So, but I've worked in other places where nurses have left. Like I remember when I worked at Jamaica Hospital, this is in New York,
Mhm.
in 1 year, there must have been like 20, almost 20 employees that left. And this is in a tele floor. So imagine 20 people, 20 employees. That's basically everybody left, right?
Yeah.
Within 1 year. And it's all because of management and the way that they handled the department. They never replaced broken equipment. Imagine going into a tele floor and not having a working EKG machine, for example. Like
Ah.
that was often happening. And or having employees in the department, not to say anything negative about techs because I've worked with some great techs,
Mhm.
but imagine having techs who don't even help you at all and just come to work to be on their phone or chat with each other. Like that was the environment we were working in at the time. And in addition to that, we were getting paid what, like $37 an hour in New York City, right? So yeah, that's why a lot of nurses left that department. But now hearing your story, and like this was during COVID, and I remember seeing many nurses coming to work with like garbage bags
Yeah.
because we had no PPE, right? And then you have a team of, medical employees who come in and they have to perform this task, like this really intense task on a patient, and they're all wearing hazmat suits, but
Yeah.
you're just wearing a surgical mask because
Mhm.
you don't have the PPE that
Mhm.
they were supposed to be providing you with, but they suspended you. That makes no sense to me.
That's the
And
trouble.
then
Yes.
and then they wonder why nurses don't want to work in the profession anymore. Like we're constantly leaving to go into other professions or starting side hustles. It's because of things like this, right?
I feel like healthcare has just become more of a business more, and I see it more and more every single day. That's not patient focused or centered. It's just profit.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were at home, you were watching, just scrolling through Facebook, and then you saw this ad for
Yeah.
nurses to come to New York City,
Yeah.
right, and pick up a contract that would pay them like $10,000 a week or something
Mhm.
like that. Was this with a specific agency?
Yes.
From what you remember? Okay, what agency was it? If you can divulge that.
Loyal Source brought me on.
Source.
Mhm.
I gotta write
They're
this
more
down.
so into, like, government contracts because, like, the way that they worded it all, and then when I saw the ad, I was like, "Absolutely no way, they're not paying 10K for this. I'm not doing it." Because I was already taking care of COVID patients. I was only getting paid, like, 2K every 2 weeks. So I'm like, "There's no way that this is possible." So I, messaged the recruiter, and I was like, "Is this real? You sure?" And she was like, "Yeah, you wanna come out tomorrow? We can fly you out." I was like, "You sure?" 'Cause at this time, like, the airports were dead. There was, like, no activity. So I was like, "There's no way you're gonna get me on a flight, so this can't be true." She was like, "No, here's a contract." So she showed me the contract. I read it through and through, and I was like, "Wow." So yeah,
Was that the first travel contract you had taken?
very first.
Wow.
Yeah, I am a pandemic traveler, unfortunately. So yes, that was
Oh my gosh, that's
I was like, "I'm
crazy.
gonna do it."
Yeah, I mean, who's gonna say no to $10,000 a week,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you
Exactly.
remember how many days or hours a week you were working?
It was 60 hours a week.
Okay, so like 5 12-hour shifts.
Correct, yes.
Was it 5 in a row or did they split you up?
They split them up. Thank goodness. No,
Yeah.
this one I was able to, like, literally make my own schedule there.
Oh, okay, cool. So did you do like 3 on, 1 off, 2 on? How did you do?
That's what I was because at the previous job, my staff job, I was only doing like 3 days a week. So I was like, let me not be too overzealous and do 5 in a row. And then I'm like, kind of burnt out. So I kind of did like 3 here, 4 there, just to kind of, peep my body, see how it felt. And I just picked up as they needed.
And how many weeks did you do it for?
I was there for about 3 months.
Oh,
I could have been there longer, but the only reason why I left was because when we did orientation for that assignment, there were am I allowed to say the name of the hospital?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. I was at Maimonides. I believe
Oh,
that's in Brooklyn, if I'm not mistaken. But there were 2 nurses that were staff nurses that ran our orientation and was like, "Hey, just so you guys know, we don't do ratios here. You just keep accepting patients until there's no more rooms left." So I was like, oh, "Okay, I'm used to doing 7 patients on med surg, so this can't be that bad." So I kind of did it, but I was in the I had the ICU experience at the time, so I was like, I've never done a travel contract, so let me just kind of peep the ICU and see how it goes there because I'm from a level 2. I know Maimonides has a higher acuity level if I'm not mistaken, so I didn't want to just jump in and take patients that were like super higher acuity than what I was used to. So they kind of put me in like a PACU environment at first. I had to be in PPE 24/7 and it killed me. So I kind of went through the ranks of like they put me on an LTAC floor. I was kind of just floating around everywhere until one night they finally floated me to a med surg floor. And I promise you, I'm not over exaggerating, but I felt like I saw my name next to 14 patients. What felt
wow.
like I was looking at the assignment board and I said, absolutely not. So I texted my recruiter and said, I'm on the first flight smoking tonight. And I left. That was the only reason why I left.
You see, people think I'm joking about New York. That's what it was like even before COVID.
Seriously? I thought that was a COVID thing because they were super
No.
fast.
No, it was not because when I was in the ER, I tell this story every single time, but I remember I'd have 17 patients assigned to me,
Oh my goodness, bro.
including no, that's including like like these step down patients, these an
Mhm,
ICU patient along
mhm.
with all those other patients. And I went there about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago, and I had a conversation with a coworker who still works in that same hospital. This was at New York Presbyterian. It's supposed to be the number one hospital in the state,
Mhm.
and it's supposed to be like the number 6 or 7 hospital in the country, right?
Oh.
Yes. And she told me one shift that she had gone in, this was way after COVID had already passed.
Mhm.
She went in and she was assigned to 20 patients. And then her coworker she was working with in the same section of the ER also
Mhm.
had a close to 20 patients. Her coworker had to go on lunch break. And let me tell you, we used to take our lunch breaks. We didn't care,
Yeah.
right? But we'd have to cover each other because we didn't have a break nurse. Yeah. So just imagine, in addition to the 20 patients she had, she's now taking care of 40 patients while her coworker's on lunch. Right. So that was the norm, and it still is the norm.
How's that safe?
Maybe it's probably gotten better though, because in the last year or so, I think it was last year, they
Mhm.
passed a law trying to bring those numbers down and create more of a ratio. So from what I've heard, it's gotten better. Because still to this point, if patients come into the ER, you can't deny these patients, right?
Right.
So
Right.
they still need to bring them in so they can be seen. So
Right.
I think in the ER, it's still going to be harder to do and to manage than the other units. So you left this position. You said you were going to get on the plane. You got assigned about 14 patients and you said, this is crazy. I don't want to risk my license, right?
Oh. I think at the point it was like no amount of money is worth
Mm,
my sanity.
yeah. So in these 3 months, do you remember how much you made?
I think I made, ooh, I think I almost hit the 100K mark. I want to say
Wow.
like 80, 90 at that time.
That's insane in 3 months.
I know. It's-
So I know, I'm sure that when you left, you're like, how am I going to make this much money going forward? Like, this is
Yes,
a lot
yes.
of money.
In the plane, I was crying, I think, when I was like, did I really? Like the regret set in, like, could I have taken care of
Yeah.
14 patients? I think I should have stayed. But then I was like, you know what? No, because how can I be a nurse, period, if I don't even, I'm taking care of 7 now, my load has doubled. Like,
Yeah.
how will I be able to make this work? So I was like, I knew that at some point I probably would have made a mistake. So I was like, I'd rather be a nurse with whatever I made versus like, sacrificing everything.
Which makes sense because I mean, you already had experience with like something that was beyond your control and they suspended you over it. And
Right.
now here is a situation where you can be in control by saying, no, I will not take this many patients. And you don't have to place yourself in a position where you may lose your license over
Right.
it. Right.
Ex-
So at least you had control over this situation.
Mhm.
Okay. So what did you do after you left this place?
I went back to Florida immediately, and I ended up kind of looking around to see. I was gonna actually start my PRN journey then, but I didn't because we were still in the thick of COVID.
Mm.
So I ended up getting an assignment down in South Florida in Miami, working for the health department. It was kind of weird. It was just like phone work where you were kind of just calling patients who were just testing positive, and we were kind of just giving them information, education on how to quarantine themselves, if they experience XYZ symptoms to go to the ED. It was just all phone job. That's all it was, like a advice nurse, if you want to call it that.
And how much were they paying you there?
That one was not much. It was like $80 an hour.
That's pretty good still for
Yeah,
South
it's
Florida.
not bad. Yeah,
Girl,
COVID though.
you know, you got so used to that $10,000 a week job.
It'll never be the same. Yes, I did that for like 2 months because they felt like there was like maybe 30 of us in one room that was kind of like a call center. And so that only lasted like maybe a month or two. I guess the budget was like, no, we're not doing that. So they decided not to keep that.
That was that COVID money right
That
there.
was
Every hospital was getting it.
yes. Yes.
Man, okay, so you made about like let's say 80 to $90,000 in those 3 months
Mhm.
working as basically it was like a crisis nurse, right?
Yes.
Was it?
That's
That's basically what it was.
correct.
And then you ended up going back to South Florida and you were working like almost like a call center. You did
Yes.
that for 2 months.
Mhm.
And during this whole time, were these all just travel gigs?
All just travel gigs, correct.
Okay. And which company did you go with when you took this other assignment in South Florida?
That was favorite staffing.
Favorite staffing?
Mhm.
How did you find these companies?
All on Facebook, literally. I am nosy. That's one thing about me. I think being an ICU nurse has made me nosier than normal because I'm always like looking into charts and like seeing numbers and things like that. And like I was always like looking into because I knew I didn't want to go back staff. That was my biggest thing. Like I'm not going back staff by any means necessary. I gotta ride this out somehow. So then I ended up finding the favorite because they have a Facebook page as well. So I found that site there and I called the number and I drove to Miami that night, same night.
Now, when it comes to you getting licensed in another state, so
Mm.
like for example, when you went to New York, do you apply for the license? Does the company apply for the license? How does that work?
At the time, since it was the height of COVID, it was emergency. licensing. So I technically didn't have a New York license. It was just because I'm assuming the governor made it
Yeah.
okay for all nurses from different backgrounds and different licensing to come to work because they were in such a staffing crisis. So they granted us like an emergency license, a temp license, so to
You
speak.
know that really it really pisses me off when a nurse is a nurse regardless of the state that they work
Right.
in. But these boards of nursing, they
Yeah.
want to make sure that they get their end of
Mhm.
the licensing fees that come with the registration in
Yeah.
each state, right?
Mhm.
So we have to pay to get licensed in all of these states when we practice pretty much the same in
Yeah.
every state. So it makes no
Nothing's
sense
changed.
to me.
Yes, nothing's
You know?
changed.
And then I get nurses who want to move to California and they're like, oh
Mhm.
man, it's taking a while for me to get my license in California. And for California, if you want to get licensed here, you need to have taken a microbiology class that has a lab
Okay.
attached to it. And
Mhm.
if you didn't take that, then you need to have at least worked as a nurse for 2 years, or you cannot even get licensed in California. Yeah. So some nurses don't realize that and they apply out here, but don't have that microbiology lab portion of their
Mhm.
curriculum.
Mhm.
So now their license is stalled because they need to either complete the lab portion or they need to complete 2 years in another state. And I just don't get it because honestly, like we all practice the same regardless of the state we work in, right? Like we all went to nursing school together. So like that is across the board. We all need to know how to like pass the NCLEX, right?
I agree.
It just makes no sense.
Out
Okay.
of all the licenses, California took me 2.5 years to get it. So yes, I know
Wow.
it's yeah.
I wonder, did you take the lab portion of your microbiology class?
Oh no, the classes weren't the problem, but yes, the state college that I went to, anatomy and physiology had a class and a lab. So and
Oh,
so did microbiology. But the problem was I applied for my California license again in the height of COVID, and I
oh,
did not know that my state college had transitioned the associate's degree portion from in-school didactic to completely online, and California didn't like that. Yeah, so they
wow.
gave me a big problem with that.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so at what point did you go from Florida to California?
This was when towards the end of COVID. My last assignment was actually in Bakersfield, I believe that's the name of the city. I stayed there for a couple months, and again, that was under an emergency license. I didn't have a California license at the time, but it was much. It was like princess nursing here in California. Like they actually adhere to ratios, and I'm like, there's a break nurse, there's resources. We don't get that anywhere else. So I was like, I'm staying here. So then towards the end, I applied for a California license and then it took me a little while, but then finally I was able to get it after like calling the BRN like 30 million times.
Uh, okay, so you worked that job in Florida, you said in the call center. Was
Mhm.
that after that one finished? Was it when you ended up applying to California?
This was like a year or so later. After I
Wow.
finished the assignment in South Florida, that's when Crucial happened.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about that then,
Yeah.
because I know I've heard a lot of things about
So
Crucial.
Crucial happened. Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that and how did you run across them and how did you end up getting a job with them?
Literally, same thing. Facebook. I'm telling you, people don't sleep on Facebook. Facebook gave me some memories. When I finished the Miami assignment, that got transferred over to a totally different agency. I don't know why, but I stayed with that new agency for just like a couple weeks. That was like the second month of the assignment, and then that assignment finished because they was like, we're not paying for these positions anymore, so you guys can just go. So again, I went back to Facebook and was like, this COVID thing is not over. We can't be over with. So I found Crucial actually has a Facebook page as well. And that was at the time that they made an announcement that, hey, we are on our way to deploying. But at that time that I got in, Crucial was already a thing in New York. I just didn't know about it. But they were kind of all finishing their wrapping up in New York because I guess New York was getting better, I assume. I don't know. But my first placement with Crucial was in El Paso, Texas. That was like they were naming it like New York Junior because that city was on fire at the time. And I actually stayed there with Crucial for 10 months. And that was anywhere between 10 to 13K a week that I was there.
Wow. And you stayed there for 10 months?
10 months in El
Were
Paso.
they paying you 10 to 13K the whole time?
They sure were.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I said. That's what I said.
Wow. And were you also working 12-hour shifts 6 days a week?
Yes, that was 6 days a week. I was clocking because at the time, the first round in El Paso, they were paying for bus time. So we would show up at the bus at 6 a.m. and they would pay us for that 1 hour. And then after work, when we got off at 7, some nurses were getting off right at 7 because if you're like OR, PACU, you don't really have to wait to give report. You could just get right on the bus. But there were some nurses that were like in med surg, sometimes you don't get off at 7. You get off at 8, 9. Codes happen, things happen. So if we had to sit on the bus, we got paid for that time too. So literally my timesheets were clocking in at like 100 hours a week just because of the bus time, the travel time we're getting paid for.
Oh my gosh. You
Mhm.
know, I am so jealous of all you nurses who did these contracts. But to do it for 10 months and you did 12 hours a week
Mhm.
or so and you were doing at least, 5 days a week at
It
least,
was
right?
6 days, yeah, at the time.
6 days. Did that ever take a toll on you? Because I mean, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever felt any emotion besides depression the entire time. I was away from my family. That was the time that like my friendships disintegrated big time because I was used to being like, girls chat, we have the group chat and the text messages. And I was always active like when I was in my staff job because I was working 3 days a week. So I had time to sleep, recoup, recover. But then when I went to Texas, it was like, oh, yeah. I didn't want to have my phone out because I didn't really know like the whole COVID environment. I was afraid to put my phone on the counter. Like I had it in like the biohazard bags when you send to the lab. So I always had my phone in that. And it was like, I don't want to touch it because there's literally COVID everywhere. And I was afraid that I was going to catch it at the time. So like I could find myself pulling back from like friendships and I wasn't really talking to people much. Like I can tell like my social battery was draining a lot faster than normal. And so I could see over time that like I was literally just here for a check. And I hated that, like in hindsight, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what you were doing with the money that you were earning?
I
Don't.
This is the part that people are like, you made all this money during COVID. Where's the car? Where's the house? Where'd you go? Vacations? Nothing. I
Mm.
spent it on anything but what was like actually, I'm not gonna lie, I put some money in like an investment account. So I have a Vanguard account, so like my brokerage account. But other than that, I just spent because I think the biggest thing with me growing up that I can think of is with my parents. They're coming from the Caribbean. It was more so just like you work, you get married, you retire, you die. Like that's it. Like there's nothing else in between. My mom used to always tell me, go to work, get a job, save. That was it. But there's no in between. Like with me, you got to teach me like I'm a fifth grader, like literally like I'm a 2-year-old. You have to explain financial literacy to me like I'm like a 2-year-old. Like if you don't tell me, okay, I have the money, okay, now what? Like I'm that kind of girl. So if I don't have that information already wired into my brain, I'm going to spend it because I felt like I worked these hours. I deserve something. I'm going to buy myself something. And it was literally wash, rinse, repeat every week until like there was nothing left.
Oh gosh, come
Literally.
on, girl. But I'm sure you've learned from this mistake.
Oh my gosh, yes. Big time.
But we all have to learn one way or another.
Yeah.
And this was your learning experience.
The hard way.
Because I know for me personally, like my learning experience was when I was before nursing, right? I ended up getting my credit score to like 513.
Mhm.
And I like the max is that you can have is like over 800, eight hundred
Yeah.
and fifty, something like that. And the lowest is in the 400s if I'm not mistaken, 400, 500. Anyway, so I got it so low and I was making at the time I think 400 every week, maybe at most. From my job, I was working like customer service rep and then I was working as a risk financial analyst for
Mhm.
people who wanted to like accept credit cards in their businesses.
Mhm.
So I was reviewing their credit histories to see if they qualified. But I didn't get paid well doing that. However, I would come home after making my money and I had a roommate. I was paying $350 a month for my tiny little room, which was basically in the living room. So every time somebody walked into the apartment, they walked into my room, right? But I was paying $350 a month for that. And what I did with the rest of the money was gamble it away. And I just kept gambling money. And I would play online. We would play, me and my roommates would play like poker. And sometimes we'd gamble in person, but a lot of the times we would gamble online. And that was my learning experience to never gamble again. Because one time I remember I was up like $2,000 before my roommate was going to go to work. And he said, "Hey, you're up now. Do
Mhm.
not gamble the rest of this money. This is $2,000. You can pay for the rest for rent for the rest of the half of the year. And I
Yeah.
said, okay, fine, fine. I'm not gonna gamble. As soon as he left that door, I just kept playing and playing. By the time he came back, I was at negative 500. And me making $300 a week, that was a lot of money to me. So I kept putting these things on my credit card, and it got my credit score so low that I said to myself, as I was getting ready to go to college, I said, I can't keep letting this happen to me. If I do keep letting it happen to me, where am I going to be in the future? Like, I saw some of my friends who live with their parents even up to like their 30s
Mhm.
and were college dropouts, and I didn't want to be in that position. So that's why I learned very early on that I need to invest my money as early as possible and as often as possible. But then I met Monica, and Monica thinks like you. Because you're right though. You're right though. If someone doesn't explain something to you step by step and in detail,
Mhm.
you're not really going to take the action because you want to enjoy life, and it's totally understandable. Like, I get people, because I want to enjoy my life too.
Yeah.
Right? But I also don't want to be the person who's working until he's 70 years old because he enjoyed his life so much that
Right.
now he has to make up for it, right? So there has to be a balance. There has to be. Okay, so let's say now you finished this contract, you've lasted 10 months.
Mhm.
And also, were you working in the ICU when you were doing it?
At that time, yes, strictly ICU.
Okay. And you know what? Let's talk about the experience then. Besides you feeling very depressed because
Mhm.
it took a toll on you, you were working a lot of hours.
Mhm.
What was it like working in Texas and working in the ICU?
I loved it. I loved every second of it. The most of us, well, since it was a crisis assignment, like 90% of the staff, I guess the nurses that were there, were all from around the country. So we were all with Crucial. So we kind of knew that we were newbies. So we really had each other's backs when it came to, you know, work, like just kind of advocating for our patients. We had to do that a lot. And I think that was probably the most draining of the experience because at that hospital that I worked at, like when you came into the ER, you were DNR on arrival. You
Mhm.
had to sign the DNR on arrival, no matter how old you were. And
Wow.
so, with us seeing these patients having not very heavy medical histories, it's like there's no reason why these patients should die, you know? So, we did a lot of advocating. I just love the fact that every day we came in with nurses that, weren't settling for just like you could tell they weren't there for a check. You could tell that they were there to really take care of somebody. So, I
Wow.
loved every moment of it.
That's awesome. I love hearing that because a lot of the times people say, not a lot of the times, half and half.
Mhm.
Sometimes I've heard very negative things about nurses working in Texas, but
Mhm.
this was a different time, right? This was during COVID. So it was different for everybody all across the United States. And during this time, were you renting a room? Did you have a roommate? What was the living situation like?
Everything was covered by Crucial. They flew me. They actually paid for my plane ticket. When I arrived, they picked me up at the airport, took me straight to the hotel, and they paid for my housing at the time. So I lived in the hotel the entire time. I didn't pay a dime for anything, unless if on my day off, if I wanted to explore and do things, which I did. But other than that, everything was covered. I just had to feed myself
Was that for the entire 10 months?
the entire 10 months.
That is amazing. Don't you wish they could do that again?
Yes.
Does Crucial still have any kind of contracts that are not exactly as high as that? Because that's not going to happen,
Right,
but
right.
maybe at least higher than the current contracts that are given to most nurses. No,
No. They
no.
do like the hurricane deployments, but other than that, unless if like another like medical emergency happens, it'll probably never happen again. But
Mm,
usually they do have contracts now, but it's just like standard, like 2,500 to 3K a week.
I see. So was this in 2019 or 2020 when you did this contract?
This was in 2019, 2020,
I
between
see.
2019 to 21, because I did 2 rounds with Crucial in 2 different cities.
Okay, so after you finished in El Paso, Texas, where did you go?
I went back home to Florida. And that's when I officially started like my PRN nursing. And I did that for a couple months. I came back May of 2021, I want to say. And then I did from May to October of 2021. I found a hospital that was literally 5 minutes away from my house. And I just did just regular shifts, like PRN shifts, and I picked up here and there. And I was making maybe 2,500 a week, which I didn't mind. It was fine. It was enough to pay my rent, all that good stuff. It was a little bit more than what I was making when I was staff. So I kind of ride that wave. And then in October of 2021, I want to say 22, that was when I went back to Crucial for the second round.
Wow, they were still hiring nurses in 2021, 2022. Wow.
Mhm. Yeah. That
Oh
was
man.
the last of it, the very tail end of COVID.
Okay, so how did you find out about PRN nursing?
Literally one day I got a phone call from a friend who was like, "Hey, love, like, did you know that there's this thing?" Well, how he marketed it to me was California. He didn't mention any other state, but you can do it anywhere, to be honest with you. He was like, "Hey, there's like some agencies in California where you can just credential and be a part of their registry, and they can just tell you every day, like, hey, this hospital has a need here in this department. Do you want to fill in the shift?" And yeah, you just pick up. That's how I found out about it. Was a friend.
Okay, so do they give you a call or do you use an app to find these shifts? How does that work?
Some of them, yes. I have some registries where I just log into my phone and I pick up whatever's available. But most agencies, they'll text you and be like, "Hey, what's your availability for the week of this to this?" And you'll say, "Hey, I'm open XYZ days." And they'll say, "Okay, well, we have you tentatively scheduled, but not confirmed." And then they'll come back and tell you, "Hey, you're confirmed for this shift, this shift, this shift." And then the night before, they'll tell you, "Hey, don't forget, we have you confirmed for tomorrow. So, just get ready or just feel like you're going to work. Just act like you're going to go to work tomorrow." And then 5 a.m., like 2 hours before your shift, they'll say, "Okay, you're officially confirmed to work at this time." Or they'll tell you, "Well, the hospital didn't need you, so you're canceled." So it's literally a day by day.
Yeah. So during this time, I'm guessing you don't have benefits, right? Because you're PRN. So you
Yes.
don't have health insurance, you don't have dental insurance, you don't have paid leave, sick leave, or vacation leave.
No.
So, but you said you were making around $2,100 per week doing this.
Yes. Mhm.
How many hours a week were you working to make that much?
I was killing it. I was working like 5 shifts a week because I was used to at that time. I'm like sandwiched in between COVID shifts. So I'm used to working like 5, 6 days. So that's when I came back home. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep going and keep working 5, 6 days because I knew I wasn't going to be making the same amount that I was making during crisis assignments. So like, you know what? Let me just go for it.
Yeah. And again, these were 12-hour shifts, and
Mhm.
you were doing like 5 days a week, you said.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So about 60 hours a week to make $2,100 a week.
Unfortunately, yes.
And was it 2,100 after taxes?
It was after taxes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's decent. Okay. So then you said by the end of that year, you decided to take another contract with Crucial.
Correct.
Okay. And you found out about them through Facebook,
That's
I'm
what- mhm,
guessing.
mhm, yes.
Guys, you got to get on these Facebook groups.
You'd be surprised.
Wow. Okay. And also, during this time, you were living in Florida when you stumbled across this new contract with Crucial,
Yes.
right? Were you living in the same apartment that you had prior to that?
Same
Or you had
apartment.
Oh,
No, I didn't.
okay.
I never moved. Same apartment.
Got it. So you were paying $2,100 a month for that apartment.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so that's just one fourth of your income, which is really
Mhm.
good. That's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Mhm.
Okay. And during this time, did you have any partners? You don't have any kids, none of that.
I had a partner, and he went everywhere with me. He literally quit his job just to go everywhere with me
That
because I
is
was I
awesome.
was so scared, especially going to New York. Like I had
Mhm.
never. I'm coming from taking care of one COVID patient to like everybody. So I was like, what if I get sick? What if something happens? My immune system, I don't have a medical history, but what if something happens to me? I just
Yeah.
wanted someone there physically to just kind of make sure I was okay because he was in the medical field too as well. So he knew.
Uh, that is so cool. It's always better when you have somebody to share that
Yeah.
experience with you.
Hmm.
Because imagine if you were doing this by yourself, and yeah, like just like you said, it was pretty depressing,
Yeah.
like being at work all the time. But at least if you can be everywhere you go with someone that you really care about,
Mhm.
that makes it feel a little bit better.
I agree.
Right? Okay, so you ended up taking this job with Crucial. What was the contract terms? Like, how much were they offering, and for how long?
Well, both rounds are essentially the same. So it
Oh,
was you basically got, I believe it was 120 an hour. That was the base. And then the OT rate was like a time and a half. And that was after 40 hours. So I don't remember exactly. It was like 170 or something an hour for OT. And you were scheduled to work 6 days a week. You got one day off, and the hospital would tell you what day that was. And the day was the exact same. You wake up, go to the bus, work at the hospital, and come back to the hotel, and you were drained. So you had no time to do anything but sleep
wow,
and do it again the next day.
man. And how long was that contract for?
The first round, it was 10 months. The second round, I want to say maybe 5 or 6. It wasn't that long because this was the very tail end of COVID.
But that's still a long time, 5 to 6
Mhm.
months,
Yeah.
because you were still making like 10K pretty
It
much.
was. Yeah. It
Oh
was.
my gosh.
That's why I get so mad at myself because people are like, where's the house? Where's the car? Like people were buying houses cash left and right, real estate popping up everywhere. And here I am just being stupid with the money. It's being
Do you
dumb.
know how much you made that entire year?
Yes, I think I made just between start to finish, I well over a million, well over. Only because I did my taxes, so I had to like I
$1 million.
categorize
Hold on. $1
it.
million.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Is there any way you can show me proof?
Let me see.
People will ask. So
I
I want to be
don't have
able to
my
see.
W-2s.
Yeah, because
I have my
people
W-2s.
will say she's lying. She's
I
lying
know,
about
I know.
that.
Trust me. No, I know. One of my W-2s says like 400 something thousand
Yeah.
because I just did. I'm delinquent on my taxes, but I
Yeah.
just did my taxes the other day.
All right,
And
this
I did
is
my
what we'll
W-2.
do, guys, because I know many of you are like, "Oh, why are you putting her on here and giving her a platform? She's lying
Yeah,
about this."
I'm not
We're
lying.
gonna show, even if it's not $1 million. I want you guys to see how much Lovely was able to make this year because I used to do this in the past, and I would show proof of pay stubs, and I stopped doing it. I wish
Mhm.
I was do it more often because then at least we have proof, right? Okay, all right. So you made this much
Mhm.
in 1 year.
Yeah.
This is insane. What did you do after this contract with Crucial was over?
The first round, I went back home and did not the
The
contract,
PRN.
PRN that I did before the first crucial round, which was a
Yeah.
2,500, 2,100 a week.
Okay.
I went and did that for a little while, and then that's when I went back on Facebook and saw the second round. So
I
that's
see.
when I went to Houston for the 5, 6 months roughly.
Oh, okay. Houston. Okay, which one did you like more, Del Paso, Texas, or Houston,
Oh,
Texas?
Houston. I love nothing compares to Houston. Houston is a gorgeous, beautiful city. I love it. It's like so much to do. It was great. El Paso was like it's right next to the border. So there wasn't really a whole lot to do. I mean, there's things to do, of course, but you'd have to drive out of the city. But with Houston, it's like it's right there. Whatever you
I
want to do
see.
is right there.
Wait, so is it El Paso, Texas, or Del Paso?
El Paso, EL.
Oh, I kept saying Del Paso. I'm like, girl, you should have corrected me. Okay, so I've never been to Houston. We've stopped there before on a
Mhm.
layover, but we never actually got outside and explored the city. So
Mhm.
you really like the city, though.
100% love it. The
Oh.
food is top tier.
Okay, we definitely need to visit. We have friends who live in Florida, and our plan was to drive through Texas
Mhm.
into and then get to Florida so we can go visit them. So that's probably what we're gonna do. Maybe
Mhm.
we'll do because we plan to move back to New York. So
I
maybe we'll take a road trip.
That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Is that like in the foreseeable future or like far out that you're moving back?
Yeah, in about a year and a half.
Nice.
Yeah. It's just we miss New York so much. People in the comments are always like, "Oh, you're gonna regret it. You're not. You're gonna move back to California right away. The next video you're gonna post is gonna be, well, guys, we're back to California."
I'm sure you have a plan and you have family. Like,
Um,
how can you beat that?
Yeah, no, we have a plan. I'm working on so many things right now, and one of
Mhm,
them is an app that I'm sure it's going to be extremely helpful to nurses.
mhm.
So, and it's going to help nurses make more money. So that's what I'm working on right now. Okay, so you worked for Crucial in Houston for 5 to 6 months.
Yes.
Then what did you do?
That was when I found an assignment in California, and that was for vaccinations because that was around the time that vaccinations were really heavy. And this was in California.
And you didn't need your license at the time for this?
Nope, still emergency. Yeah, yeah. Governor Newsom, I think was made the
Yeah.
decision to make all just emergency temp licenses for everybody.
Okay, where in California were you doing this?
This was in LA. This was like right by the airport, the LAX airport area. And
Oh.
then that one kind of died out. So then I was able to transition over to Snap Nurse is the name. That was the very final COVID assignment that I did. And that was the one in Bakersfield.
Wait, what's a snap nurse?
Oh, that's the name of the agency. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. They are actually really well. They're still, they're called Snap Care now. They moved, but at the time they were called Snap Nurse, and they specialize in like daily pay. That's when I fell in love with the daily pay world, and I was there for maybe 4 or 5 months. That was the end of my COVID journey.
And how much, do you remember how much they were paying you with Snap?
I was getting paid 1,000 a day, and I was working 5 days a week at the time.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's crazy. A
yeah,
thousand dollars a day?
yeah.
Oh
Well,
my
I do
god.
that now, so it's not like a big thing.
Yeah. So this was a PRN role with Snap.
No, that was a contract, like a crisis assignment. Yeah, that was
Oh,
my
okay.
very last COVID crisis contract.
Gotcha. So you did that for how many months, you said?
About 5 or 6 months in Bakersfield. I was there for a while.
Okay. Okay. And then where did you go after that?
After that, I went back home, and that was when I worked on my California license, and that's when I went back to my tried and true My PRN back at the hospital where I was making 2,500 a week. I always fall back on there whenever I go back home because they're like the most reliable, consistent. I know I always get my shifts. I'm like really good with the scheduler and the ICU manager, so they always make room for me.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize this is why I'm not afraid when me and Monica tell people that we're going to move back to New York. At the end of the day, we're all nurses, right? If you ever want to move back, if you want to go to a different state, if you want a different job, you can do that, guys. You're not stuck in one place.
Mhm.
So there's no regrets.
Mhm.
You can just go wherever you want to go.
Right.
And if we're not going to be happy when we move back to New York, we'll figure it out. We're nurses, right? And it's a lot easier for me and Monica because I'm not the only one that's a nurse. She's
Right.
also a nurse. She
Right.
can work a job if she wants to, while I stay home and just, do whatever I want at home. No, just you know what? She works a lot more hours than I do, and it's because she's per diem. So she makes like $133 an hour, and I'm benefited, but I'm part time. I only work like about 20 hours a week, no more than that. It's actually less than that. I work around 17 hours a week, but
Wow.
I'm benefited, and I
Mhm.
make $103 an hour. But I stay home doing things like this, working on our business.
Right.
I've hired like programmers that I'm managing so that they can work on this app that I'm trying to create.
Mhm.
I also work with my video editor, so I have to manage him because he's editing all our videos. And I have a spreadsheet editor who helps me with the spreadsheets that I sell on our website. So I'm managing employees,
Right.
and all of this is a tax write-off. I actually just recently applied for a per diem position, so if I get that, then both of us will be unbenefited,
Oh.
right? Yeah, unbenefited. But if you own a business, all
Right.
the premiums you pay towards insurance are a tax write-off. So that's the plan. I'm going to do it that way. I'll just write off our health insurance.
Right.
That's why you got to think, when you own a business, there's so
Mhm.
many ways to get around the tax system. As an employee who works for an organization, you can't do that
It's true.
because, a W-2 employee, there's only so much you can write off, but
Right.
as a business owner, you can write off a lot.
Mhm.
So, I want to know, why did you decide to get your California license? You could have gotten your license for Texas.
That's true.
Why California?
To be honest with you, it was more so the ratios because I don't know if it's a COVID thing, but when I was in Texas, the ratios were not good. It was rough. It was rough. But I knew that they were like my friend told me in California, there's like laws that are passed and they actually like exercise those laws in the hospital. So it's like what really got me was a resource nurse. I was like, I've never heard of that. Not in Texas, not in Florida. We don't get that anywhere. Not even in New York. We didn't get a resource nurse. But it's like, oh, you have actual breaks. Like in Florida, it was like, you did you take a break? Oh, you didn't? Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what to tell you. But like in California, it's like, take your break. You have to. I've never had a break outside of a 30-minute. So it's now that's like I get a 15 and a 30. Some places I get 2 30s. It's like, what? So with that coupled with the ratio was what made me like, okay, California is where it's at.
Hmm. You see, I guess this was the difference between New York and other states because New York obviously didn't have good ratios,
Mm.
but you also have nurses who just don't give a right? So like they're like, listen, you want to go on a 2 hour break? Go ahead, I'll cover you. And we did that. We didn't care. There were times we would go on 3 hour breaks. Like that's how crazy we were.
It's your whole shit.
But we didn't have break relief nurses, so we had to cover each other. That was the downside. But yeah, in California, like I work in a hospital now where in the ER, if we get a patient who has to be restrained because like all other methods have failed,
Mhm.
that patient becomes a 1-to-1. So if you had any other patients, you got to give up your patients and just focus on that restrained patient until they're no longer restrained.
Even if it's a non-violent? Like if it's
It,
just
no, it has to be a violent
it
patient.
has to be violent, okay.
Yeah, if it's like a demented patient who's
Yeah.
nonviolent, then no, that's not a 1-to-1. However, if that patient is too much to take care of, too much to handle, and a sitter is just not doing it, then
Mhm.
yes, it will become a 1-to-1.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Wow.
Then, if you get a patient who comes in is critically ill, let's say is a STEMI
Mhm.
or a stroke that just came in, that's going to be a 1-to-1. If you have a patient that's on a drip, like an insulin drip,
Mhm.
and you have four other patients or
Mhm.
three other patients, you will have to give one of them up and stay with three patients. And in addition to that, like you said, we have our resource nurse. We
Yeah.
have float nurses that come and help with lining and labbing patients, drawing
Mhm.
labs if you need them to, medicating patients for you, transporting patients to other units and other, locations. And then
Mhm.
we also have the break nurses that
Mhm.
send us on our lunch breaks.
Right.
So all these resources that don't exist in other states.
Right.
This is only a California thing.
Right. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
Man, okay, but it took you 2 years to
Yes.
get your license approved.
Mhm.
Wow. What were you doing in those 2 years while you were trying to get your license approved? What were you doing all of these other things like, taking on the crucial assignments
Correct.
and working a PRN jobs in
Correct.
Florida?
Yes.
I see.
Mostly
Wow.
in Florida was where the bulk of it was, and it was like, how I know that we're in COVID, so it's like that can't be the reason why you're not approving it. So one day I just said, you know what, let me just call the BRN and see what they say. And they said was
Yeah.
they were investigating my state school because the curriculum switched to online. So they were investigating to see if it was still the same as in person versus online. They wanted to, I guess, validate the, I don't know, something from online to versus in person. It just wasn't. I don't know. Maybe they
I
just
guess
didn't.
they just wanted to make sure it was an accredited program because of
Yeah.
all the news that was like making the headlines back at the time with like some Florida school that was just like
Uh-huh.
giving licenses to everybody.
Yes, yes. So annoying.
Okay, so then you got your license at what point? Like what year did you end up getting your license approved?
This was 2022. I've been here for about 2 years now, so 2022.
Okay. And what would you say about your experience so far since moving?
I love it. I love it. It's like a melting pot out here. Everyone's so great. Everyone's so great. Of course, there's some hospitals where there's like nurses that are just like miserable, but as far as like with the bottom line, because I know the reason why I'm here, which is to get out of debt and kind of reverse the damage that I did the previous years, and I've been able to do that within a year. So I'm always so chipper on the floor. So I don't know, maybe my attitude is just contagious, but I've
And
literally had no issues between like resources, breaks. I love it.
so, are you still doing PRN or do you have a full-time position here?
No, I'm doing PRN still.
Okay. So tell me about that. What company are you going with? Is it several companies that you're still working with?
Correct. It's companies. Ooh, it's a wide area of where I'm working. Like right now, I live in San Bernardino County. So I'm in Rancho Cucamonga, is a city that I'm renting a room out in. And I could work from anywhere from out here in the San Bernardino Valley to LA. I think the farthest I've gone is Karev was last year. That's where I made the most money just doing PRN strictly. I was working with a company called Karev and I was working in Fresno. So that's about it was a 4+ hour drive that I was making twice a week.
Wow.
Mhm.
And how much were they paying you per shift?
I was making 1,000. Some places 1,100 to 1,200 depends.
Mm. And how do you get your benefits?
I all by myself. So when it comes to retirement, I have a Vanguard account. So every Friday, it just automatically deducts money and just throws it into to my brokerage account. And then I also have my own insurance policy that I have with United Healthcare that I pay for every month.
Do you know how much it costs?
It's around the 280 mark that I'm paying per month.
That's not bad.
It's not terrible, yeah, and I use it everywhere. I use it in California, Florida, all my my yearly physicals, things like that. I usually don't go to the doctor more than once a year unless if I'm super sick. But yeah, it's not bad.
Well, what's the deductible like? Do you know?
That I don't know.
Oh, girl,
I
you're gonna have like a $20,000
probably
deductible one of
so,
these days.
probably so. But then again, I've never used it outside of a physical. Like I have my dental exams and my cleanings every 6 months, and then I go see a doctor once a year just to do a
I
regular
see.
head to toe physical, and then that's it. I don't use it more than that.
Yeah, I was looking into insurance because, like I said, I'm trying to go per diem.
Right.
But I looked at the insurance cost for the current plan that we're in with Kaiser,
Mhm.
and it's about $2,200 a month, maybe $2,500 a month for a family of four because there's
Oh,
four of us. And when we go to New York, it's gonna be about $3,600
wow.
for a family of four.
That's
And I'm just like, but thankfully, I mean, it still sucks, but thankfully, New York has subsidized programs,
so good.
even for families that are high income earners.
Mhm.
So you can make up to like, let's say, I think $300,000 a year, and they'll still cover a portion of that $3,600. So instead of paying $3,600, I think we saw something like $2,800, which is still crazy.
That
It's
is.
still a lot of money, right? But when it's a tax write-off, let's say, our highest tax bracket, for example, would be like 30%,
Mhm.
then that means we would get $850 discount from that. So we would pay $1,900. but it's still a lot.
It's a
Still
lot.
a lot. My gosh. So the plan is to find a way to make more money doing the things we're doing right now
Mhm.
so that we can replace not only replace our nursing income but exceed it when we
Yeah,
move back to New York. And that's why I'm working so heavily on trying to make sure that this app is built before we move to New York.
that's
So at
smart.
least we can get a source of income through that app. So you said you paid off your debt in about a year. Like how
Mhm.
much debt did you have?
I was in the six figures only because
Ooh.
I don't know much about charge cards. I know them now, but then I did not. The comparison between regular credit cards and charge cards. I think somebody needs to teach a master class on that because I had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, can you explain it to people?
Essentially what the charge cards are with I have them through American Express. So I have about like 8 or 9 cards through them because at one point my credit was stellar. So I grabbed every card I could get. And so the difference between the charge cards are they say there's no preset spending limit, but there is. They give you a low key limit where it's like a pay over time limit. So they'll say, well, you don't have a preset spending limit because it's performance driven. So the more you charge, the quicker you pay back, the higher the limit will go as fast as possible. You can get a 20K limit tomorrow if you want to. So essentially what you do is with the pay over time limit, they'll say, but there's a $3,000 pay over time limit. So any dollar amount that's charged over 3,000, you're responsible for paying that back all the way up until your $3,000 limit. So at the time I wanted to do Airbnb, I thought I was going to be like a side hustle queen. So I ended up scaling up to like 7 or 8 units and I put it all on my credit cards because I wanted to furnish them, get them out so I could start churning a profit. And they hit me with a bill one day. It was like, hey, you got to pay this. Your preset limit is 3,000 and you have, let's just say 10,000 on the card. So you got to pay all that back until you get to 3K. And this is your monthly minimum. So I had to pay all that back every month. And it just kind of, ran away from me. So my thing is pay your credit cards down, please.
Yeah.
10%, whatever it is. Like be responsible. Don't be like me. Don't be like me.
Hey, at least you learned from your experience. Some people don't. I know someone personally who doesn't make much money to begin with. I think she makes like maybe $30,000 a year at most, and she's already filed for bankruptcy like 3 times. The
Oh,
last time she owed like $70,000 on her credit cards. Every time she takes her car to get serviced at the dealership, she
hmm.
leaves with a brand new car. Yeah.
What?
Yes. And I mean, she's about 50 years old,
Okay.
so she's been making these mistakes, since she was a teenager, basically. But this is the kind of stuff I try to tell my daughter to avoid, right? Like I'm constantly trying to tell her you need to start investing as early as possible.
100%.
Yeah. So these were 7 Airbnb units or 7 units that you wanted to rent out through Airbnb.
Mhm.
Did you actually keep those units or did you just end
I
up
had to
getting
pay to break the lease for all of them, and then there goes the credit card debt, even higher.
wow.
Yeah, I had one that was really successful, and I think this was towards the second round of Crucial when I knew that COVID was over. Like, there's no more crisis assignments after this, and I was like, I have to find a way to keep bringing in the income in as much as I was making while I was a nurse. So that's why I'm kind of impulsive, very impulsive, and I think impulsiveness and credit cards don't mix. So at the time, I was just like, yep, credit card, yep, credit card, yep. I gotta furnish this one, yep, credit card. And it just kept, I just,
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And me personally, like I have this thing called shiny object syndrome. And if I see something and I'm like, ooh, that I can make money doing that. Let me
yeah.
try that. That's kind of like how I am. So I get it. I totally get it. So what's the plan going forward then at this point?
Right now I'm mostly focused on kind of like you, like my business.
Mhm.
I'm trying to get to a point where it can sort of replace my income because I'm still working like I've been in the pandemic. I'm still working 5 to 6 shifts a week, literally, just to get to a point where I never have to feel that feeling that I felt when I was like knee deep in debt. So I'm at the tail end. I'm not completely credit card debt free, but I've made significant progress. I want to say like maybe anywhere between 80 to 90%. So I'm still working like I have 100% worth of credit card debt.
I love
But
that.
I'm now more focused towards rainy days, emergency funds, funding my brokerage account, just so that way I can I've been kind of doing some research on the market to see if I can, get my brokerage account to grow for me and have my money work harder for me than I am for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally, totally. So, what business did you start out of all of this?
I want to say consulting, because the success that I've been able to produce for myself as a PRN nurse, I'm able to duplicate that for others. So I guess you could say like a nursing consulting. I call myself the PRN plug. That's like my moniker. So I've turned that into a business where I teach other nurses how to do the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I really love your business model because a lot of people don't know, even in the nursing industry, they don't know about PRN nursing.
Right.
And I mean, even me, I interviewed hundreds of nurses at this point. And I think you are the second nurse that I've interviewed who talks about PR and nursing, but the ones that I've spoke with before, that's not where they make their money. They are either nurse practitioners and they
Mhm.
do travel nursing. There was one that I interviewed who's an LPN who does PRN, like LPN as in, what is it? PRN nursing as an LPN.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I know your
And
Yes.
yeah, and she told me she uses apps
Yes.
to find the jobs.
Yes.
But I never spoke with a nurse who does PRN nursing for registered nurses.
Mhm.
So I love that you shared all of this information with us because I know there's so many nurses out there who now realize they can make more money than they're currently making in their home state because
Mhm.
you can do this in any state. It doesn't have to be just California, it doesn't have to be Florida or Texas,
Correct.
right?
Mhm.
So, if I have anybody out there who is interested in reaching out to you,
Mhm.
can you be actually before that, what kinds of things would you be able to help them with if they're interested in getting into PRN nursing?
Well, I would everything is done from experience. So I usually like my nurses that are interested in living in one area and duplicating expenses like I am. So I'd give them resources for like transportation if you want to ship your car out. I give them resources as far as housing because housing is important because the company doesn't pay for my housing. They don't pay for my transportation. And I kind of give them multiple agencies that they can keep in their back pocket because a lot of nurses they're mostly worried about, especially my out of state nurses, they're worried about cancellations. So I give them a thorough list of agencies that they can do either in their backyard or they can do across state lines that just in case if that one agency cancels you, you can pick up another one right away, right after that. So the consistency is what I'm able to give them.
Oh, so I have a question then when it comes to the agencies, are there agencies that work across multiple states?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, like
I
Care Rev
love
that I mentioned earlier in
it.
Fresno, they work across not every state, but they
Yeah.
do work most states. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure a lot of nurses are familiar with AYA. They have their own PRN registry department that goes across every state.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So let's say you wanted to work in a different state. Do you need to first get licensed or do they help you with the licensing?
Ion particularly helps you with the licensing and you don't even have to work with them. But yeah, they will do the whole application process, fingerprinting. They'll give you everything step by step. I usually recommend nurses to get non-compact licenses, like that's New York, Massachusetts, Oregon, California. Those are where you get some of them better ratios, but definitely more competitive pay as far as the
Mhm.
shifts are concerned.
Now, what would you say would be the benefit to going PRN versus going as a travel nurse, like a travel contract?
Honestly, the flexibility. I'm more so a flexibility kind of person because I'm working on my business and I'm trying to transition my sites onto business only. So I don't want to be stuck having to work 3 days a week and I don't want to be stuck having to ask permission or like requested time off. I hate that word. So I want to be able to say, this is when I want to work. And if you need me, I will work.
That makes total sense. I think when I go to New York, I might have to just get back with you because I need to do PRN when I get to New York. I
Absolutely.
think
Yes.
so. That's a good option. All right. So if people want to reach out to you, how do they contact you?
Honestly, Instagram. I am the per diem plug. No underscores, no periods, just per diem plug spelled out.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, cool. If you enjoyed this video, then check this video here where I interview a nurse that makes $1 million a month through multiple businesses, including an NCLEX prep course.